Being efficient and well-trained is a top priority for the Bowling Green Fire Department. One way to ensure this is through the accreditation process, which occurs every 5 years. In this episode of Spotlight on Bowling Green, we will discuss the latest re-accreditation process of the Bowling Green Fire Department and how it benefits our citizens.
The history of accreditation for the Bowling Green Fire Department dates back to about 2005 when we first started looking at it. The accreditation program for fire departments at the time was a pretty new thing, so we were on the front end of it. But there was a lot of record keeping and processes involved in the whole startup of the accreditation for us that made it take longer than we thought. And so we didn't actually achieve accreditation for the first time until 2008, and then it's a 5-year period until you get reaccredited again. So we just recently were reaccredited in 2013. We are the only fire department that is accredited in the state of Kentucky. I don't know of any other departments right now that are already in the process, but I have had a number of other fire departments ask me about it, and we're providing help to them in any way we can. It's important for us to be accredited because it's a measure of the services that we provide to the citizens of Bowling Green. In today's world of government, it's important to have a measure that you have to go by. For us, accreditation provides two things. One is it sort of identifies what we're supposed to be doing, and it validates that we're doing that. And then it measures how well we do it. And then the other focus of accreditation is to always strive for improvement. So those three factors come together, and it kind of sets a roadmap for your department for years down the road. It's a planning process. It's a work in progress, and it's a measure of how well we do the job that we're supposed to be doing.
The reaccreditation process involves numerous hours of research to update documentation on all operations. The Bowling Green Fire Department must verify their proficiencies in areas such as training, response time, fire suppression, fire prevention, and public education. One of the tools they use is the SharePoint site, which allows them to upload documents and communicate with the peer review board.
Primarily what I did was went through the existing documentation that we had and update with new numbers. Obviously things have changed inside the city in the last couple of years since our previous accreditation. So what my job was to track down some of that information and then put it in the new formatting that was provided for us. A little bit different from, I guess, the previous accreditation process for this. We actually uploaded all of our material onto the website.
Basically, peer review on the SharePoint site, but the way that typically works is we get all of our information based on the categories that we're looking at for our self-assessment. We take those and we load them onto SharePoint. The peer assessors can look at our documents as we develop them and kind of go over those documents in quality control, make sure they look good, and we're answering the questions that they're asking of us.
We can say that we do something, but then we have to actually be able to prove that we do it. So what the exhibits are, they're basically documentation that we provide showing what it is we're doing specifically. Key aspect of that from this department is we do track so much through our records management software that we have that documentation. It's just a matter of finding.
For instance, the hiring process. I had to gather documents, how we hired, the process that we hired, the tests that we had. I had to gather the actual tests that we administered and put them in for the exhibits for the peer assessors to come in to take a look at. Well, the first process that we did was actually look at the categories that I was in charge of and try to figure out the best way to go about gathering information, because it was an extensive amount of information. The things that I couldn't find on my own, I would send out emails for help, and without the help from other departments in the city, it would have made my job almost impossible.
We put together a risk assessment for the whole city, and we took a lot of data, a lot of input from different areas. Well, we divided the city into 6 districts, 6 response districts. We broke down our responses to each district in terms of structure fires, EMS runs, vehicle accidents, anything else that we may respond to. We broke that down into the 6 districts and started to evaluate our risk based on that in those different areas. So when we did that, we also began to identify target structures as a risk assessment. What we're trying to do is identify the probability that an event will happen in a certain area, and then the consequences of those events. So based on that, we began to make sure that we had enough resources that if a fire happened in that building, we've got enough resources to cover that risk. So that was the more detailed part of the risk assessment.
After the long process of collecting documentation, the next steps of reaccreditation involve an on-site visit by peer assessors and a meeting with the Board of the Commission on Fire Accreditation International.
Peer assessment on-site verification is the process in which it's after the SharePoint peer assessment, where they look at the documentation, and the head peer assessor or the lead peer assessor says, okay, these guys are ready for a visit, to actually show us that they're really doing these things. So 4 different peer assessors show up. There's a lead peer assessor, and they come to our city and they go through our documentation. They interview me as being over the training division. They interview our training division assistant chief. They interview suppressions assistant chiefs. They talk to firefighters. Everybody really that represents the fire department. They talk to them, and they see that the documentation that we're putting forth for accreditation is actually valid and truthful. Also, with the peer assessors' findings, is they typically give us strategic recommendations on places we can improve based on the categories that we've researched. Then what we do is we start working on those strategic recommendations and try to improve in those categories.
So once the peer review team had come here and verified and validated everything that we had put in our reports, they take that report back and put it all together in one package and give it to the board of the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. The board reviews their report and either approves their recommendation or looks for some other background reason why it may not be recommended. Usually they take the peer review team's recommendation. So they took the peer review team's recommendation for accreditation for the Bowling Green Fire Department, and then Deputy Chief Napier and I had to go to the conference and meet with the board of the CFAI to be approved for accredited status.
You sit in front of these people and they ask you questions about your accreditation. They ask you questions about your department, about how your department's working. And they also focus on those strategic recommendations and ask you, how do you plan on improving in these categories? And then at the end of that, they either dub you reaccredited, or they can also say there's not enough information here to reaccredit you. But we did get reaccredited, and we felt pretty confident we were going to get there.
The reaccreditation benefits both employees and citizens by creating a self-assessment of the Bowling Green Fire Department's work and ensuring a high standard of service to the public.
I feel like this accreditation process is good for the department, and from a standpoint of it gives us the opportunity to look at what we're doing in comparison to departments across the country. It gives us a national standard to really shoot for, and from our standpoint, from personally, what it showed me is how well this department is run and how well we keep track of things.
We didn't change a lot of the way we operate based on going through the accreditation. It was a great assessment, an internal assessment for our department to look at every aspect of what we do and look for areas to improve. The goal of accreditation is continual self-improvement. So we go through this self-assessment process and look and see exactly what we do and how we do it. And I think it's been a very good process. One of the things that stands out to me is the response times. It's something we've always measured, and to look at that and say 90% of the time we're doing that around 8 minutes. Well, most of our responses are significantly quicker than that. We're usually on the scene at your house within 6-7 minutes. And to look at it that way, I think, is a very impressive feat. To be able to be ready to provide service to the citizens of Bowling Green that quickly is one of the more revealing things that I think we found out of the accreditation process.
It's really an internal self-assessment of how you're running the emergency services here in this town, and it just really gives us a good opportunity to have some insight on places we can improve, ways to improve, and also to deliver a better emergency service to the public.
I think being accredited is a reflection of the support that we enjoy from the citizens of Bowling Green. You need to be well supported in order to do a good job as a fire department, and the city of Bowling Green certainly does support us very well. It's also a reflection of the fact that we are doing things right, and it's important to measure that. It's also a reflection of the commitment of the members of the fire department to improvement and being as professional as they can be every day at work. That's what accreditation really means: professionalism.
If you would like to learn more about this or any other Spotlight on Bowling Green program, contact City Hall at 270-393-3000.